friend Scott Kurtz one time said part of the problem with being a storyteller is that you start to project your ideas of where the story should go onto real life. Do you remember that?
I remember that.
So, he's like, I'm having a great day walking down the street, and he goes, as a storyteller, I know that would be the perfect time for a brick to fall on my head, right?
Right.
Because so the problem with being a storyteller is you start to project how things can go bad or how things could go good, but it could also go bad.
Yeah.
And so my problem living through quarantine and coronavirus is, as a storyteller, I'm projecting like 4 months out, 6 months out, like, what do I need to be worried about down the line, right? And part of this, I was like, all right, and having been a student of World War II cartoons, I'm like, all right, how did they react in World War II to things starting to go south? And so I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to plant a World War II victory garden. You remember those gardens they did in World War II?
Yeah.
And they're like, listen, America, listen, United Kingdom, our food sources might get a little dodgy for the next couple months. So everybody in your back garden, in your window, in your pots around your house, plant some tomatoes, plant some green peppers, plant some green beans, that kind of thing. Just get victory gardens going around the U.S., that kind of thing. And so I was like, you know what? I'm not sure how the food sources are going to keep going over the summer here. I'm just going to put some tomatoes in the backyard. I'm going to put some garlic, some green beans, some peppers back there. I'll take out a few of my already dying flower plants anyway, and I'm going to put in a little mini victory garden, right?
Put in a garden. It's a great idea.
So I haven't done gardening in a decade, but I was like, you know what? I'm no dummy. I know what I'm doing. I'll figure this out. So I get about 50 tomato seeds together, thinking that if I can get 50 tomato seeds, if I can get 25 seedlings, I'll get maybe 5 viable plants out of that, right? You know what I mean? In the way that like you have successive failures that lead to 5 good ones, right? So I take 50 mini pots, and I start planting all the seeds that I have. And I run out of pots, as you do. And I'm in quarantine, so I can't go anywhere to get more pots.
Right.
So I'm like, well, I got 20 seeds left over. I'll just put some soil in a cardboard box and just throw the seeds in there, and to hell with it. If anything comes of it, that's fine, but they're just extra seeds at this point.
You don't want to waste seeds after all.
And so, Brad, for a week and a half, I'm greenhousing the other ones that are in their little pots, and I'm handling them with such care. I'm giving them extra, doing all the,
You're singing them to bed at night.
Yeah, exactly. I'm giving each one of the pots a little kiss every night as I'm going to sleep. I love you. I hope you produce a tomato plant. I love you. I hope you produce a tomato plant.
Tucking them into their little flower beds.
Yeah, exactly. Meanwhile, the cardboard box, I give it a kick every time I go by it, right? Like, hey, you can go to hell, cardboard. Hey, cardboard box filled with dirt, get out of here. You don't belong here. Well, Brad, okay, so it's a week and a half later. Guess which group is flowering like mad and seedlings coming out the yin-yang? And guess which group hasn't produced a damn tomato seedling, Brad?
Hasn't even come up?
Not one freaking tomato seedling in the pots. That damn cardboard box is like, hello, spring! And it's like, there's like 40, I only put 20 seeds in there, and there's like 40 seedlings. I don't even know how that's possible. Like, other plants have come over from other gardens and been like, I want to grow in that box.
Yeah. Now, have you thought about why that might be?
Yes, I have thought about why that might be, actually.
Why? What did you come up with?
The way I thought about it is that the breathability and water solubility of cardboard might actually... Okay, no, you're shaking your head. What do you think it is?
Tomatoes thrive in acidic soil. Cardboards are very acidic.
Oh, Brad Geiger.
Because you know that from shipping books, right? That cardboard is acidic.
Yeah.
And that acid from the cardboard leached into the soil, and tomatoes love acid. I think peppers are the same way. So what you should be doing is cutting up a couple more cardboard boxes, putting them in your garden, and acid up that soil.
Oh my God, Brad, you know what this tells me? I got to start saving all of my egg cartons for the next couple weeks and just do another batch in egg cartons. Brad Geiger, well, oh my God, he's a cartoonist, he's a raconteur, he's a lover, and he's also a tomato, I was going to say fetishist, that's not the right word. He's a tomato specialist, not fetishist.
I've got a love-hate relationship with tomatoes. So I cannot eat a tomato, like a raw tomato. With all that jelly stuff, I can't do it. Italian food, marinara sauce, can't get enough, right? Which is basically just crushed tomatoes. Salsa verde, chopped up with onions, I can't inhale that stuff enough. but put a tomato in front of me, and it's like a garlic in front of a vampire. But yeah, and forget about actually going out and planting. I'd be hopeless. But I do know from somewhere in my family, I remembering that tomatoes like an acidic soil. And when I saw that on Twitter, I'm like, oh yeah, the ones in the boxes are going to do better, because it's going to bring that acid right in.
The funny thing about living in California is, California is legitimately an amazing breadbasket. Like everybody thinks like, oh, the Midwest produces all the grains and corns. California produces a shit ton of food for the U.S. Like it's an amazing agricultural center. I think it's like, I don't even want to say the percentage. It's a really high percentage. So I'm talking to my dad and I'm telling him that, I'm going to put together a victory garden. He's like, you can't lose in Southern California. You drop an avocado seed, 2 weeks later you got a 40-foot avocado tree, You drop a tomato and all of a sudden you got a full garden of tomatoes. Meanwhile, Johnny Idiot over here, hand-lovingly planting in mini pots, can't get a damn tomato to grow. I throw some seeds into a cardboard box and it's springtime for Hitler all of a sudden.
Johnny Tomato Seed over there.
Yeah, exactly.
I need a picture of your empty, vacant victory garden. I definitely want to see this. What's the opposite of victory? You're growing a defeat garden over there.
Mine's a Quisling garden.
Yeah.
So yeah, how did Dave Kellett die? Was it COVID-19? No, he couldn't get a damn tomato to grow. He died of starvation.
He died of malnutrition. Oh, Dave, I got to tell you, I'm losing so much weight because there's no we've made a real effort to buy local right now because it's important.
Yeah, you got to support.
We got a milkman all of a sudden. We got a milkman.
But a lot of people are, by the way. A lot of people are getting milkmen.
Yeah. And of course, Reading Terminal Market, if you've ever come to Philadelphia for the convention, it's right across. It's basically a big farmer's market. We're getting a bunch of stuff from them. And they've been so overwhelmed that it's like roulette. Last week, we bought a carton of milk. We got a beef brisket. It was fantastic. And of course, since they don't want to come back out and pick it up again, it's like, just keep it. So we're like, oh yeah, we're ordering from these guys all the time. Because sometimes you get what you ordered, sometimes you get a little something better, sometimes a little something worse. So you take your chances. It's brought a real sense of adventure into the kitchen, I got to tell you.
Isn't it funny though how, America, a land for, in grocery terms, a land of surplus. Remember when the Soviets in the 50s, when Khrushchev came to a U.S. grocery store and he was like, well, this is a lie. He thought American grocery stores was a Potemkin village. Like he didn't realize that American grocery stores are ridiculous in their variety. And it's so funny as an American sometimes to go to a grocery store or a farmer's market these days and like, we don't have eggs. No eggs this week. There are no eggs. Sorry. There is no milk. There is no bread this week.
Maybe butter. I go downstairs. We got butter this week. We have maybe butter next week. All right, that's great. We got eggs, no butter. But the other thing is like, okay, you and I are spending all of our time at home. I went to the studio once because it's kind of safe. There's nobody in my. I go into a car with just me. I go to my studio. It's just me. I drive home. It's just me. But still, I haven't spent a lot of time at the studio. But normally, like I'd be home snacking my way through the day. There's hardly any snacks, because we're pulling way back and we're trying to be a little bit careful. I'm losing all kinds of weight.
I know you look good. I'm down 14 since quarantine started.
I gotta weigh myself. And speaking of which, I gotta say, just thinking, this is the time when you really realize you've married somebody and you made a great decision, or they made a great decision, as this case might have been. My wife is built for this. She's the kind of person, she can look into a refrigerator and see, okay, I've got chicken and this and that, stir fry. And then she makes an incredible tasting stir fry. Or she's like, she goes full pioneer woman. Yesterday she was pouring something out of a pan into a jar through a strainer, and I said, "What are you doing?" It's stuff that we usually throw out. And I'm looking, and she goes, "Oh no, I'm saving bacon grease. We're gonna use bacon grease to cook with, and it's gonna be great. Don't worry." And she's she's reusing bacon grease. She's doing stuff with food that I've never even considered doing. You really realize that in my case, I made a really good choice. This woman is amazing. I don't know what I would do without her at this point.
Yeah, it's so what's fun about being married to a Cuban, I did not know that a viable egg substitute is, for lack of a better phrase, bean juice or bean water. And there's a whole Cuban tradition of cooking with bean water and bean juice. And oh man, it's a fun substitute. It really works.
Yeah, no, it's just amazing. And then there's all these other moments, like you smell fresh baking bread wafting up, and it's like, oh man, this is the best quarantine ever.
Listen to you, jeez Louise.
There have been nice things about it. I was telling Gale before the show, I was socially distancing before it was trendy. There's something about social distancing that I'm really enjoying, like to the point that I'm going to be a little bit disappointed when it's over.
God. Well, on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to ComicLab, the show about Brad talking to one other human being during the week.
And loving it and making and how lucky you're that person.
I'm the person. I'm the one person that Brad's like coming out of his bear cave from winter, like he shakes the snow off and he's like, all right, I'm ready to talk.
Great. And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his friend Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week's hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. We have one of my favorite cartoonists in the world on the show today, Gale Galligan. But before we launch into that, we got two bits of business to launch into first, Brad. First is we got to thank our sponsors for this week's show, Wacom and the new Wacom One over at wacom.com. Both Brad and I have a Wacom One. And Brad, you've been using it a lot around quarantine, haven't you?
I don't know what I would be doing without it right now. Because I've stayed to home quite a bit. I've been working out of a corner in my bedroom, which is a little bit unusual. I've gotten used to working in the studio, but I've been working over here, and I've got that Wacom One out, and it is really an enjoyable process. I see people, trying different things and trying different technologies, but when I take a look at that screen, the size of the screen that the Wacom One has, and just the responsiveness of my stylus when it hits the glass, it's really gotten me through this quarantine in a beautiful way because I just love drawing on it, and it's so easy just to set up in whatever corner you can set. And you can very easily adjust your ergonomics because that is important.
Yeah, that is super true.
It's been a lifesaver for these few weeks.
This is the part of the podcast, everybody, where we see Brad slowly take off his wedding ring and just place it on the Wacom One.
Yes, this ring comes right on. And did you notice with the Wacom One, speaking of rings, you had these little different colored rings that you could kind of personalize your stylus with?
I did notice that.
I love touches like that. That's old school Apple Macintosh stuff.
I was going to say, that feels like old school Apple Touch. I thought that was really clever.
It's such a great idea and such a neat way to, because I'm sure Wacom, they're smart people, but I'm sure they did some psychology behind that. In that moment of choosing that color and putting it on your stylus, you're kind of like presenting ownership. You're imprinting on that.
Yeah, it's literally like signing a piece of art. What I mean? It's a small little physical choice that just says, this is mine, that kind of thing,
Yeah, now I got to figure out if they've got other different designs and stuff, because now I'm all into it. But yeah, I've been really enjoying.
And then I took the other. I don't know if you did this. I took the other 3 rings and wore them on my hand like Mr. T. So that was pretty fun.
You've got very much skinnier fingers than I do. But listen, Dave, do we have any questions from our $5 Patreon backers?
We do indeed, Brad. This question comes in from our $5 backer over at patreon.com/comiclab. Jay, and Jay writes in, question, how often do y'all find yourself, by the way, a use of y'all in the wild? That's not a northerner.
Did Jay use the apostrophe?
He does use the apostrophe and
All
everything.
right,
Yeah. So
correct
how often
usage.
do y'all find yourself coming up with story ideas outside of your respected comic universes? Do you follow these threads in any way, or just let them percolate and reveal themselves again to prove they'd be worth exploring? Brad, this is a great question because you are very much an idea guy. I'll get texts or emails from Brad every once in a while, like, "Hey," that kind of thing. And so, what do you? What?
That's when I'm drunk dialing you. I just, hey,
it's 2 a.m. What are you doing? All right, I'm going back to bed. Anyway,
hey.
No, but I have seen your mind at work. And what do you do when you get an idea that is outside of your universe or a significant step away from your universe, such that it might as well be considered outside? How do you handle that process? How do you handle it when it happens? What do you do to record it or capture it or explore it for a while and see if it's something with legs? How do you handle it, Brad?
It happens often, and I definitely believe in never letting a good idea go to waste. So just because it was outside of my universe, I'll make a note of it. I've got a special notation that I use in my sketchbook that I put up in the upper left or the upper corner of the page.
Yep.
That basically just says there's something here that you want to come back to. It's just like a little star inside of a circle that I darken in the negative space. But it's just my symbol that.
There was a lot of detail. It's just a little star, and I draw a little unicorn next to it.
And when I'm ready to retire a sketchbook, I'll go through and hit it with.
I see. So then to go look for the star. All right.
Right.
Here I am making fun of you. It has a value. I see. Okay.
And then I'll copy those over to the first couple of pages of the new sketchbook, and so every new sketchbook has a bunch of these ideas that have been brought forward from the old one.
Yeah.
But if I'm stuck on something, I can page through and look for those symbols to see, I had this idea, maybe that'll work. But I like holding on to that stuff for two reasons. Number one, I hate if you don't do something with it, you end up obsessing about it, and that's not good. So if you write it down, you say, I'm going to get back to you later, then you can't obsess about it because you're doing something with it.
Right.
And then the other part that's good about that is that the more you sit on an idea and the more you percolate it, the more your subconscious mind is actively working on it, the better it gets. So that later on, when you go back to the idea after putting a good amount of time in between of it, all of a sudden, you've got something new to add to it or a different twist, or now you know how that's going to work. So I never feel bad about getting an idea that's outside of my universe because I know eventually I'm going to find a way to fit that in. And it always happens. And sometimes the longer the better because you've been percolating. How do you deal with that, Dave?
So Brad and I, for the longest time, have been using an app called Wunderlist that you've heard us mention it on the show. Unfortunately, Microsoft bought it and they're shuttering it, and so they're transitioning over to Microsoft To Do, which Brad and I are using, but like grumpy old men, like I like Wunderlist better. I don't like Microsoft To Do. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. All of that is to say that whenever I have an outside of my universe project idea, I try to capture it previously in either Wunderlist or Microsoft To Do because it's written, it's put into concrete, it's there, but it's also out of the way. You know what I mean, Brad? It doesn't, like you said, it doesn't monopolize your cycle of creativity because you have captured it somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. And you can go back to look at it. So what Brad is doing with his star unicorns in the corner. I'm doing but the basic idea is to capture it, know how to find it when you need an idea or need to go back to it or need a project to look on. But then also, once you've captured it, to Jay's question, if it keeps percolating, there's something there. If it keeps bubbling back up, you're like, there's something to that idea. So like, I have a couple back burner projects. One of them, Storyline, which we'll get to at some point here in the future. Another one is the children's book, Your Life is a Line, that I've talked about on this show. Mm-hmm. Another one, I either want to do another anatomy book, Brad. I've done Anatomy of Authors, Anatomy of Animals. I either want to do Anatomy of Dogs and do all the dog breeds, or Brad doesn't like that idea, or I want to do Anatomy of Dinosaurs and do how each dinosaur has a unique personality, but they all, because a pterosaur looks very different than an ankylosaur and that kind of stuff.
I know exactly which one I'm pulling for. I love the dinosaur idea. The dinosaur idea would be wonderful.
Brad, it was like I had literally waved a dog dropping underneath Brad's nose when I said Anatomy of Dogs, and Brad was like, "Fuck you, no, 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 no!" And then I did Anatomy of Dinosaurs, and Brad's eyes lit up like a kid in a candy store. I'm like, "Well, I guess I know which idea I'm going with."
I am not a good poker player. No, it's not that I think the dog idea is bad. It's just that I was surprised because for me, a dog is animal, and I was like, well, you've done animals. Why do you need dogs? But I totally get it, and it would sell very well. I have no doubt in my mind.
And then I have another idea that I don't know that I've ever run past you, Brad. Have I ever mentioned? I don't know if this is a good idea to mention it publicly, but what the hell? I have another idea that I want to do, the Cowboy Kaiju project. Did I ever talk to you about this?
Yes, you've mentioned it on the show, as a matter of fact.
Oh, have I? Okay. And that one's also percolating, because every time I think about it, I'm like, it would be fun to see like the American president have to call in Nobel and his TNT. You know, like who and Gatling and his new gun and all these sort of different cowboy gunslingers to try to bring down a kaiju in the American Southwest. You know, that would be a fun story to draw. And the fact that it keeps every couple months, it percolates into my brain and pops back up again. I'm like, that would be fun to tell.
And besides, Cowboy Kaiju has a good rhythm to it.
Right, I know. So I think it would be it'd just be fun to see like Gatling guns and steam trains being used against a kaiju with TNT and you know. You basically have the president deputizing outlaws and gunslingers to try to bring down a kaiju. It would just be fun. I just think it would be fun. Yes. So anyway, all that is to say, am I doing anything about it? No. Am I taking any action about it? No. But I've captured the idea with enough detail such that anytime it percolates back up and a new idea comes on, I add to it in that file, or in Brad's case, with his shamrock unicorn star notations in the corner.
Pink rainbows, blue clovers. I've turned into Lucky the Leprechaun over here.
No, but the idea, I think, Brad, both of us would say, is to capture it.
Yes.
Get as much detail down, capture both the detail and the mood. I think the mood is important to capture too in these early notations.
Yeah.
And then let it percolate. Because if it keeps coming back to you 6 months down the road, 18 months down the road, then there's something to it. There's something there.
Yeah.
Any other last minute advice, Brad, to that kind of outside of your universe ideas coming into your head?
No, in other words, the main thing is don't obsess over it. Give it its space, give it a place on the shelf. Tell it that you're going to come back to it, so that it doesn't obstruct you. And then count yourself happy that you've got such a fertile imagination that you're coming up with all these other ideas that you're going to get to someday. That there's something good about knowing that you've got this thing to fall back on, that if you ever really get locked up, you've got a whole bunch of stuff to go back. And if your mind works like mine does, you might start to see a little theme develop in all of these ideas that are outside of your universe. And before you know it, you're going to have a new universe.
Now, listen, I have competing desires to both make fun of, but also to explore an idea that you just said, which is, so I want to take it seriously. I was going to make fun of it, but I want to take it seriously. You said, let the idea know that you're going to come back to it.
Yeah.
Tell me more what you mean there, because there's something interesting about that. I wanted to make fun of it, but I actually think there's something interesting about that.
Because I mean, in a certain way, every idea has a life, has a personality, it's not just a thing. It's got its own.
Well, there's a part of Brad's psyche that owns that, right? Isn't that what's happening? Like a part of Brad's psyche is like, this is fun, right? This is a fun idea, right?
And
so
you're
telling that part of you.
Yes. Yeah. That, what I hadn't actually, sussed it through all the way, but yeah, in a way you're kind of talking to yourself there where you're saying, I'm going to get back to this.
You're basically yes-anding over time with yourself. Yeah. And in a way you're not negating like, well, that's a dumb idea. Well, all I have is dumb ideas. You're saying, no, self, that has value. We can't do it now. It's a shiny object. We can't do it now, but we will get to it. Let's capture all the ideas about it and get to it later. Right.
Yeah, in a way, you're yes-anding yourself.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
So anyway, we have a little red light that's blinking, which means Brad, one of my favorite cartoonists going right now, is joining us. So let's hit some switches and invite Gale onto the show. Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics. Well, Brad, since this is the week that all three of us were slated to be at the Alaska Comics Festival, it is delightful to be able to bring onto the show one of my favorite meetups from last year's Alaska meetup, Gale Galligan. Gale, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having me. It is a delight to be here, although I am sad about Alaska.
Oh, as am I. I was so excited to bring Brad there this year, Gale. I was so excited, and then a little thing happened called coronavirus. So that puts a limiter on things. But anyway, before we get launching into the conversation, I want to make sure everybody knows Gale's work can be found at Galesaur, and that's over at GALESAR. Well
done.
I'm good at it. GALESAUR.com. And of course, you know her from the Babysitters Club, from one of my favorite works in all of comics, and I'm not even kidding about that, her mini comic John. And then coming out this fall, Logan Likes Marianne. That'll be coming out in the 8th book in the Babysitters Club series. And Gale, Brad doesn't know yet the joy of Alaska. So tell him real quick before we get launching into the conversation about your career, what are the joys of the Alaska Comics Fest?
Oh my goodness, Brad. You get to go to Juneau, Alaska and meet just a bunch of really enthusiastic, excited comics fans while also looking at Big Mountain. I loved it. There were beautiful birds, wonderful people, and just like the vibe is so nice. I really loved getting to like hang out with a bunch of cartoonists in a new context, free from internet, and just like yell about life stuff in a very like secluded way. No murders. It was great.
Well, Gale,
No murders. I love that that's the capstone. No murders.
It was worth going in, but you know.
Yeah, you kind of buried the lead there, Gale.
Can confirm 0 killings.
0 murders.
Now, I've got to ask you, because Dave, before you jumped in, Gale and I were chatting, and we were, of course, the topic, as always these days, was how are you doing through the coronavirus, the quarantine, and everything. And I told Gale, I said, I have been social distancing way before it was trendy. I am loving social distancing. And she said that she was much the same way. So my question for you, Gale, was being in a kind of a tight, cohesive group like that. Were you able to find a little bit of time for yourself, or was this something that was like that didn't even matter? I loved being in there because of whatever reason. How did you handle being a little bit of an introvert in this group setting?
That is such a great question, because it was definitely going outside of my comfort zone to say, okay, I'm going to go to camp for the first time, and also it's going to be with a lot of people I admire. No pressure.
Right.
What I really appreciated about it was the way the camp was structured, where you go and then there are a bunch of options for breakout groups. Like there's a schedule on a board, and you can choose whether or not to go to a screen printing workshop or go outside and draw in nature. So I found a lot of little pockets of time to kind of recharge, go outside, draw a tree, and then go back and have something in common with other people to like talk about or experience. It was a really good balance for me personally, like as a shy baby who also loves comics just enough to get out there.
Yeah. And they did a nice job, don't you think, Gale, of creating a physical space where if you wanted to, you could walk over and sit by the fire by yourself for a minute, which I did once or twice. And yes, of course, people could walk up and start chatting with you, but most people were like, I can tell if they've got the old sketchbook out It's kind of like the universal code of cartoonists. Like they might want a little time to themselves.
Right, like I'll slide over and draw next to you, but that's it. We're together now.
That word use actually made me realize I don't know, and I'm curious to see, how do you self-describe yourself as an artist? Is it as a cartoonist? Is it as an illustrator? Is it as a creator? Is it as an artist? How do you self-describe?
Oh, that's so fun. Yeah, I usually go for cartoonist, just for comfort's sake, because I do write and draw, and both of those things together are what is interesting to me. Graphic novelist seems a little bit like too cool for me, so I'm just going to say like cartoonist, comicer,
And for you growing up, what was the artwork that sparked you wanting to be a cartoonist? Where you looked at it and you're like, oh, I just want to trace that, I want to draw that, I want to be that. What were the titles that did it for you?
Oh my gosh, you'll be shocked to know that Garfield was my first comic.
Secretly hoping you would say that. All right.
I know. Fun fact, Garfield and I share a birthday, so it was kind of predestined from day one. I still remember, Dad would get the newspaper every day, and I would go read the comics straight through and clip out my favorites so I could make little binders of my favorites to read again later.
Oh, wow.
I know.
You're one of those people. That's fantastic.
I was such a huge fan. Yeah, so it was Garfield, Calvin and Hobbes, obviously. I know you have a gentle relationship with Calvin and Hobbes.
Yeah. Well, that explains it, Gale, because didn't you back in like 2017 or so do a couple of fan comics that just centered on the Garfield universe, like The Life of John Arbuckle?
Yes,
that was you, right?
It was me.
Brad, they are delightful. They're some of my favorite things in my comics collection. So can I just sing your praises for a minute?
Please do. You're too kind.
I would love for you to describe in your terms what the mini comics attempt to do. But for me, it was such a loving look at what it was to be a cartoonist, in this case, John, Garfield's owner, and what a fun and fresh and new attempt to take on Garfield as a property. And so I just can't sing your praises enough about how unique and fresh and wonderful I thought that was. But for people that have never experienced it, Gale, how would you describe what the approach is for the mini comics of John?
You are so sweet. Thank you. Basically, Garfield. You might remember that canonically in the first maybe 2 strips, Garfield's owner, John Arbuckle, is a cartoonist. He is at home drawing comics. And as I got older and started, making comics for a living myself, I would keep on thinking back to Garfield, as one does. Do you not think about Garfield every day?
Key moments of every day, I'm flashing back on it. Yeah.
You wake up, you think about Garfield. So
exactly.
I kept on coming back to, okay, I know John's a cartoonist, but what would he be like today? Is John going to comic conventions? Is he on Instagram? Is he posting pictures of his cats? Like, what is this guy up to? And that was a question that consumed me for a brief period of time. I started, just writing out little ideas of what kind of cartoonist John might be and how his life might be like, and asking myself questions that ended up turning into gently autobiographical questions about just, why I love comics and what the comics community means to me as a person. Yeah, so it's a very selfish comic.
Yeah. For me, one of the things that resonated so beautifully with that was the way you so perfectly and sweetly captured the insecurities of the cartoonists going to their first Comic-Con, and how at some points it's the people in their life, the friends, the family, the partners that gently nudge them that know you can do it. And I don't know, it's just something about that was so sweet and succinct. And I thought you captured it perfectly about those imposter syndrome moments. It was great.
Oh, you're really kind. Thank you. Yeah,
I can't sing the praises of that mini comic enough. And Brad will back me up on this. I don't tend to like mini comics as a form because I either tend to want like a bigger, meatier tome, or I tend to like standalone comic strips. And for whatever reason, I never really liked. I never cottoned onto the mini comic, the stapled look, as much as others have done. Which actually raises the questions. For you, why was mini comic the right choice? Why did that work for you?
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, I personally, I'll fight you. I love mini comics.
Good. Yes, fight me on that. Yes. I'm
No.
very willing to admit that I might be wrong and stubborn on that one. So go ahead.
No, it's possible that you just need to get into some really, really good mini comics.
That's
There are
actually
so
probably
many
true.
out there.
Yes.
For me personally, I just absolutely love them for a few reasons. Number one, as someone who makes big graphic novels for a living, being able to make a small mini comic is a chance to explore something new without a huge commitment, to get like personal closure and like, hey, I made this much more quickly.
Right.
It's a chance for me to kind of like spread my wings and play around in a way I wouldn't get to in a larger format necessarily, which is what I love seeing from other people. Like when you have something that's smaller and less monetarily or time demanding, you can play around more with the format. You can make it really long, you can make it really fancy, you can screen print, you can put like little prints on vellum and then like turn it so that there are new layers. There are so many options with the physical crafted comics you might not necessarily get when you're trying to make a really big book or a standalone comic strip. That is super duper cool. Gosh, there's so many that I love. I'm trying to think.
No, it's okay. By chance, have you ever been out to the University of Ohio's collection of mini comics?
No, it is genuinely like my goal to go see those cartoon collections.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. They and I forgive me, audience, for blanking on his name. Brad, the former editor of King Features, that had that incredible collection of mini comics.
Jay Kennedy?
Jay Kennedy, yes, Brad Geiger with the win. Oh my goodness!
Oh my gosh!
I didn't think you were going to pull that one out. That was great. Jay Kennedy, bless him, at his death, donated his mini comics collection. I believe it's at Ohio State, and just in general, their collection is amazing. Gale, if you ever get out there.
Oh, that sounds incredible.
But you're right though that there is a level of experimentation, and I see it in your work too, because you have many styles that you can tackle. But two that I've noticed running through as themes in your work is you seem to have a very clean line style, very much in the Garfield tradition of the clean line American comic strip style, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a second look that's watercolor that is more looser, freer, whimsical. And so I wanted to talk with you for a second about what, among the many styles that you can do and have done, but what do those two different styles give you as an artist in your toolkit that one conveys this kind of message and one conveys a different kind of message? What is that? What makes you choose a clean line style versus, say, a watercolor style for a mini comic or a short story?
Oh, that's so interesting. Oh my gosh. Let's see. I wish there was a fancier answer for this, but often it is necessity. Watercolors, I absolutely love. I got really into trying to make water comics, like inspired by Kara Scott's Beautiful Darkness, if you remember that comic. Yeah, I absolutely loved that. Loved Black Sad. And wanted to try to paint comics myself. I got really into it and then realized it was taking a lot of time.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work, but I feel like there's a really nice, how do I put this, natural, whimsical, kind of magical feeling that paint can give you. Yes. Where the comic feels texturally grounded in an interesting way that I like to look at. So it's really fun. I love playing around with that. But then sometimes I just need to get paid.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I remember looking through some of your work, and I had this reaction, and tell me if you think this is unfair, because it felt to me like when you're using your controlled line art style, it was like the story was fixed and needed to get out, right? And so it was more, the art becomes more in service of the story. Whereas for you, and again, third party, but looking at your watercolors, it was more like the story was looser and less assured, and it could be interpreted different ways. And so the watercolors were complementary in that regard. You know what I mean? Like I'm thinking more of the travel mini comics that you've done, or
yes, in
terms of the story is not fixed in the sense that life is not fixed, if you know what I mean. This is more of a diary type approach of I don't yet have the answers, in a way that maybe Babysitter's Club does have the answers because it's a fixed, concretized story. Do you think, is that an unfair or my own reading being imposed upon art styles there? And it's fair if it is, by the way.
No, that's a really cool observation, and I'm delighted to hear you make it. I need to like go home and think about my entire life now.
No, this show is not meant to do that. No.
No, that's really cool, and I think you do have a good point, especially in that travel comic. I think you're talking about Farang.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is basically a story about my experience recently going back to Thailand after 15 years for a family wedding. My mom is Thai. I don't speak the language very well. So it was very much a feeling of getting to see people I love but am not close to and wish I could be. Like, very, very longing. That is a comic that I made kind of more in a like moment to moment, day to day, let's see where this goes sort of way. And I definitely feel like what you're noticing stylistically ties into that, where I wasn't as concerned with what I had already plotted out because I was just moving forward.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I guess that raises a question for all three of us. Do you think that our art styles choose us or that we choose our art styles?
Ooh, Brad?
That's
you want to
That's a great question. I think. Oh no! You know what? I think it's definitely. I think it's definitely our art style chooses us. I don't think you can choose an art style, and it goes back to what I've said before. Style is something that you never see through the windshield. You always see it in the rearview mirror. It's something that happens because of who you are as a person. You can aim a direction. I was definitely aiming a direction when I started out. I wanted to be Burke Breathed. I wanted to emulate that. And that was really where I started out. But the more I worked and the more that I saw the end results and what I could do and built my skills, it quickly became something completely different. And I couldn't have aimed for where I got.
Or where you ended up. Yeah, okay.
I could only get there, by mistake.
Yeah, it's like, what is it? Our mistakes make us. Like, that's the style.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like, it's not necessarily a conscious choice. And how do you decide, like, how do you figure out how a person ends up liking different stuff? Like, are you born like that? Do things like surprise you as you start growing up? Like, did me seeing an Eddie Murphy vampire movie way too early change my like entire life track? I don't know. But yeah, I feel like it's definitely just a collection of things that happen to resonate with you at the right time. You're slowly going through grabbing stuff that works for you, whether you realize it or not, and just kind of starting to hone that and incorporate it into a cohesive thing. I don't know how intentional a person can really be about that, aside from saying, I like this and we'll try to practice it now.
Yeah, it's interesting because the times in my career where I have, for lack of a better phrase, tried to create a style or tried to go down a direction, if that makes sense. Looking back on it 6 months later, I'd be like, well, that didn't work at all. But the attempt very often got me to a place that I, like in a way that Brad said, that I wouldn't have gotten to. But I guess what I'm saying is I missed the mark, but in missing the mark, I still hit a really interesting place in terms of a new look. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like you figured out something that doesn't work and that's valuable.
Yeah. It's kind of like what Edison said. I didn't fail. I found 10,000 ways to not succeed, or whatever that quote is. You know?
Well, and I think there's danger in trying too hard to develop a style. I've seen it happen where I see somebody drawing and I'm like, you're doing these weird things, and they say very proudly, well, that's my style. It's like, yeah, but you're also doing you're not doing great character design. You're making some images that are distracting because you're trying so hard to be original.
Right. Like, is it serving what you're trying to say?
Yes. And it's like, I think you can try too hard to develop a style. I think that's much more important for you to take a look at what you're drawing and say, is this my aesthetic? Is this beautiful to me? And not worry quite so much about, is this something that nobody else has ever drawn this way before?
Right.
Yeah, like no matter how hard you try, your style will end up finding itself, and other people will recognize that, even when you don't.
Exactly.
Yeah. And even
Exactly.
the moments, even when I think, oh well, I'm drawing very differently. Like I've got my little special hat on, and like, oh look at me, I'm drawing so differently. No one will know this is me. And literally everyone in my life or any fan will be like, oh, that's a Dave Kellett drawing. I'm like, dang it! I thought I was being so unique and drawing it a new way. And it's like trying to mimic your voice or hide your voice. You know, it's like, well, that's Brad talking or that's Gale talking.
I know. Like sometimes I think it'd be really fun to make a side account just for fan art, and it's like, no, people would end up recognizing this.
I know.
I can't change.
I know. It's true. It's true. It's funny because I had the very clever idea, not clever at all, but I thought it was very clever, Gale, at the beginning of the Trump presidency. I was like, I'm going to do a side account, an anonymous account to do political cartoons about Trump because I don't do political stuff. But I was like, at that moment, I felt so activated that I was like, I'm going to do it. And then I realized as soon as I looked at my 20 or 30 initial sketches, like, people are going to know this is me. There's no way to hide that this. Everybody has bug eyes. It all looks like my drawings, you know?
And you've got a distinctive voice when it comes to how you write comedy, even without looking at it. If you ghost wrote a political cartoon, I bet you I could pick it out of a group of 6 because you've got a distinct voice.
Yeah.
It's like a visual John Mulaney.
Yeah. Oh my God. What a guy from a different era. His comedy pitches are so 1940s, like, we're having a lot of trouble here. Going around the old like if he dropped the word sock hop or something, you'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. That's John Mulaney.
Yes.
It's so great. So let me ask you real quick. I want to switch gears. So Babysitter's Club, tell me, before we launch into the 8th book of Logan Likes Marianne, tell me how that involvement started for you. On, by the way, a book collection that is very treasured in the Kellett household, you should know. So tell me how you got involved in Babysitter's Club and how that came to fruition and how the first initial steps were. What was the launching point for that?
Absolutely. Let's travel back in time to 14? I was going to comic book grad school in Savannah, Georgia.
Oh, SCAD?
SCAD, yeah.
Hey,
I went to SCAD, got an MFA. I have a lot of opinions, but it worked for me personally. One cool thing that they do is once a year, SCAD has an event called Editors Day. They bring in editors from a bunch of different houses. And my last year at SCAD, they happened to bring in David Saylor from Scholastic. I, at that point, knew that I wanted to make comics for kids and was gearing my entire portfolio towards that. Like young adult stories that were very magical, like stories about kids with yo-yos, just putting in a bunch of sample pages. So I got into a room with David Saylor, and he was just like flipping through my portfolio like, okay, and I'm just like terrified on the inside, like, oh, he hates that. I later found out he was super sick that day.
Oh, no.
I know. But anyway, we ended up keeping in touch. He introduced me to Cassandra, the editor on the Babysitter's Club, and they were looking for someone to pick up where Raina left off. And they asked me to do some test pages. I said, yes, are you sure? Because I was a huge fan growing up, and I loved Raina's comics.
Yeah. Now you've got to figure out how to fill those shoes, how to follow that act.
Exactly. So like no pressure at all. Don't even worry about it. But yeah, I sent in some test pages, and they ended up actually really liking them. They asked me to make 2 books. They asked me to make 2 more books. And now I have made 4 books, and I'm very, very happy I got to do this, genuinely.
Yeah.
And so speaking of stepping into shoes, in some respects, you had to mimic or move towards someone else's style, speaking of styles. What was that process like for you? I mean, you had come out of grad school, so you had been doing project after project where you had been tasked to try different styles, different looks, different mediums, that kind of stuff. So it wasn't totally new. But in that specific moment, in a professional setting, what was that like to try to move toward, if not, mimic, but move toward someone's style?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm lucky that they gave me a reasonable amount of freedom. Like, they didn't want my work not to look like my work at all, which I very much appreciate. That would have been hard. But basically, coming out of grad school, the style that I was very grounded in was very, like, big eyes, cute, anime influenced. That is still how I am, and I stand behind it.
Yeah.
But what they asked me basically was, could we ground this a little bit more? Could we make it slightly more realistic so that people aren't completely taken out when they move from Raina to you?
Right.
So
Yeah.
like slightly smaller eyes, smaller mouths because I'm very exaggerative. And just kind of like every now and then like pointing out like, okay, Gale, they don't need to sparkle all the time. And I say, are you sure though? I like
I'm
it.
pretty sure they do. I am pretty sure they do.
Right? I stand behind every single flower petal. But, yeah, that was basically every now and then, like, I would push an expression very far and they'd say, let us tone this back a little bit. And that was how we kind of moved back and forth to come to a compromise style that is still very much my own. I'm still very comfortable with it. But it was fun figuring out what that balance ended up having to look like.
Right. And then now in the 8th book, having done the previous ones, did you kind of get the feeling of like you could really kind of set yourself free? You're like, I've got to be me. And you could do as many sparkles and flowers as you wanted to. Like, you're like, I'm going out with a bang.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I'm so glad that I got to have this book as my last book.
Oh, good.
Because I got to introduce some cool new characters that I really wanted to see in the books. I got to have like some big romantic drama tension and also deal with Marianne, who I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast. Like, I'm a shy person, a kind of like introverted person, and that is very much the Marianne character. This book is all about her figuring out how to navigate her shyness, her pseudo social anxiety with the idea of going out to dances with Logan and making huge mistakes. Like, all her friends hate her now because she messed up? Obviously not, but let's deal with that emotionally. So I really got to like make that book my own in a way that I'm very proud of.
That's fantastic. I'm glad that was a final good hurrah for you. That's delightful.
Yeah.
That makes me happy when you deserve that. Because, as I said, it's a very treasured collection in the Kellett household. So as a dad, I got to say thank you. Thank you for your work on that. It means a lot to me. In a way
Thank you.
Brad, you'll back me up on this too.
Yeah.
When someone is able to reach your kids through comics, even as a cartoonist, I am so grateful and thankful in a way that's hard to explain that doesn't make me sound cheesy. So I am thankful to you.
Oh my gosh.
Separate from your gifts as a cartoonist and as an artist, but as an author, I'm thankful to you for what you have given our house. So thank you for that, Gale. I appreciate it.
Hey, that means a lot. And it also, like, genuinely, it means a lot for me to be able to interact with these kids and parents in this capacity. As someone who was a huge fan growing up and who loves comics today, like, getting to meet parents and kids who both like this thing I like is so nice. It's really great. And just being able to see them be like, I read this and now I'm going to read all the comics. Incredible.
Yeah.
Now, Gale, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Oh,
okay?
No.
I'm on Twitter right now.
Yes.
I'm psyching myself
I'm bringing up a tweet from 2009.
It seems back in 2009. Yes. Speaking of flat Earth, no. Here's
Speaking
Gale.
of flat Earth.
Another thing I stand behind.
I'm just trying to think of some tweet that would be like embarrassing or something.
No, I love that. That was a good question.
Gale, okay, I know vague posts are no fun, but I'm psyching myself up for launch soon, and I'm like stupidly excited about it. Cannot believe I have succeeded in roping multiple people whom I love and respect into this. Gale, can you tell us what's going on?
Oh my gosh. Okay, listen. When does this podcast come out?
Two, 3 weeks.
Okay, perfect. It'll probably have already happened. Listen, I've had this idea floating around for about 2 years. As you know, I am a huge fan of things and a huge fan of being a fan of things. You might have been able to tell from stuff like John and also all the Shrek fan art I've drawn in my life. Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I noticed that in your 6 fan arts that you had a particularly good Shrek.
I have a passion. So what I wanted to do was bully my friends into showing me their embarrassing tween and teen fan art and then talking to me about their experiences growing up as fans of stuff.
Oh, wow.
It's going to be so much fun,
What
you guys.
a fun idea.
I love how it's coming along so far. Just getting to send embarrassing interview questions about LiveJournal and getting to talk back and forth is so much fun.
Because we're coming into the zone now where, like, for somebody old like Dave, that would have been on paper that has been lost a long time ago. But for somebody coming up a little bit younger, that old fan art is all digital and you can still find it.
Oh yeah. Like I got my first like small Wacom tablet when I was like 12 or 13. So it is all
wow.
there. Yeah.
Right? Because my fan art is long gone. But this stuff still exists.
Is yours still out there in the void there, Gale? Like the old live journals, the old not face, not
MySpace.
What was MySpace? Thank you.
I'll never tell. No, I'm kidding. There
Immediate Googling on my part,
Right. There are definitely some archives out there that I try to stay separate from, not necessarily because it's like bad or embarrassing, but because I am a grown person now. And want to let teen me exist like in that separate space.
Right.
Yeah. But I'm still like so deeply fond of who I was and like how that shaped me as a person that I'm really excited to just like tap into everybody else's feelings about that.
Well, so that we can help spread the word on it, what will the name of that project be going out into the public?
Absolutely, yeah. It's called The Fans We Were, and that is the domain.
That's great. thefanswewere.com. All right, that's awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Between that and Logan Likes Marianne in the fall, Gale, you've got some good stuff coming up in the future.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited.
And we also have one more opportunity because if you listen to the show for a while, you know that Dave and I are really big on self-publishing. We're strong from that tradition. But we've also said in the past, the one place that we definitely can see a real value in working with a publisher is for like young adult publishing, Scholastic, and that sort of thing. Here we have this Gale Galligan. Sitting right here, right in front of us.
Right in front of
Gale, because we can't give this advice. It would be hollow coming from us. Gale, you got a young person sitting in front of you that wants to publish young adult graphic novels. Give this person your 3 best pieces of advice.
Oh, wow. Oh, my gosh. Okay, I'll do my best. And again, circumstances change almost daily. Maybe my advice won't apply to you, young person, specifically. But hopefully you find it helpful regardless. If not today, then in maybe a few years. I don't know. But number 1, make the comics you want to be known for. Make the comics that you want people to see and think, this is something I should hire you for. So if you want to make young adult middle grade comics, start making those. Make mini comics about young people having the adventures you want to show. Tell the stories that you already know you want to publish. The second thing would be get those out there. Put them online, put them on Webtoons, put them on your website, put them in conventions if that is something that you are able to do at this time. Zine Fest, mini comic events, SPX, TCAF. If you can, even if you're not tabling, go and hand stuff to people, have an exchange, start to make a peer group, make some friends, just talk to people about their comics. That is a really good way to start connecting with people so that if an opportunity comes across their table, they can think of you.
Yeah.
Those are the really, honestly, 2 big things that I would suggest. Like, I know it's like not always helpful to say keep drawing, but that's kind of the thing, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it really is.
Yeah, no, it's true. And what's funny is, and it's kind of a shame to say this in the time of quarantining, but it is interesting how just talking to other cartoonists, that FaceTime, over the course of my career, that has had such an incredible value of even a person that I met 10 years ago, you lock in on their face and you remember their mood and their personality. And for some people, it just is an instant affinity of like, I already loved your work, and now I love you as a person. So I'm 1,000% going to send job recommendations your way, or whatever. You know what I mean? Things like that that come across the transom. And so those initial, special early 20s meetings too are also so valuable to let you know that you're not alone, and that here's some paths you can take that other people are trying. And hey, let's help each other out as we try to rise this tide together.
100%. Yeah. Like it is all about like your peers. Like if you are helping each other out, like getting in little criticism circles, like that is so helpful. Like you don't need to like aspire to be friends with a very famous person. The people who are going to be famous are all around you right now, if that matters to you.
Yeah. Well, Gail, to head out for the day, what fun stuff are you reading that's bringing joy into your heart these days?
Oh, bless. I just finished Dragon Hoops by Jean Lin Yang, and I'm still thinking about it. So that is a big joy bringer. It is an autobiographical sports story that is an absolute delight. I cannot recommend it enough. If you liked the Cheer documentary but didn't want as many injuries, this is the comic for you.
Didn't he? Now, wait. Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't he teach high school basketball or coach high school basketball?
No, he taught at high school and thought, what if I followed this basketball team? So he talked to their coach. So close. He got involved with the team, though.
Because I know he teaches math in Northern California, right?
Yeah,
or somewhere in the Pacific
he does
Northwest.
or did, yeah.
Yeah. But for some reason, I thought he coached basketball. Okay, that's my
very
own
cool.
mismemory of that. But,
no, it's
awesome.
close.
Okay,
yeah.
I'm going to check that out then. That's great.
And then
Thank you for that.
one more recommendation. The second and final book of Ngozi Ukazu's Check Please series is out today. So in a few weeks, it'll have been out for a few weeks, and you can still buy it and read it. It is a absolutely heartwarming college hockey story that involves humor, feelings, and pie. All of these things are wonderful. I love it.
We heartily endorse it. Yeah, Ngozi came on the show a few months back, Brad, and she was a delight to talk to. We can't recommend her work enough.
Yeah, I will shout her.
Those are two great recommendations.
Anytime.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you. This has been such a treat.
And yeah, in general, thank you for coming on. I appreciate that in moments of quarantine, we were able to connect and have you on the show. This is really delightful. And again, thank you for your work on behalf of the Kellett family. Thank you for your work.
Oh.
And on behalf of me, thank you for John. I continue to think that is one of my favorite things that comics has ever produced. So thank you for that.
You are too kind. Thank you so much.
And for those that are not familiar with Gail's work, I cannot recommend enough. Head over to Galesaur, GALESAUR.com. And then, Gail, can you remind everybody of your Twitter and Instagram handles?
Yeah, the handle for both of those is RoboChai, ROBOCHAI. But if you look up Gale Galligan, that'll work just as well.
That'll work just as well. And I cannot recommend enough. Go search her out on Twitter, on Instagram, and in the Babysitters Club, and for John. And if someone wanted to get John, because I don't know why I'm raving about John so much, but you have that on your shop, right?
I do, yeah. You can buy it physically on my Big Cartel or digitally on Gumroad, which might be easier considering the situation.
That's
but
true.
All those links are on my website.
Gail, you were wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on, and best of luck in the months ahead.
Oh, thank you, and right back at you. Thanks again.
Thanks, Gail. That was great. It was so great to have Gale Galligan on the show. Thank you so much once again. And you can get Gail's stuff at galesaur.com. And I got to tell you, I've been perusing it, and it's well worth your time. So thanks again, Gail.
It is absolutely worth your time. And Bradley, speaking of kindness and wonderful things, I believe you have a thanks for the kind words for us for this week, right?
I got to tell you, this brightened up my entire week. You know how sometimes somebody just says something and they're effusive in their praise and it just delights you?
Sure.
This is what happened recently on Apple Podcasts from Alan Gladfelter. And listen, Dave, we're kind of running out of time. Alan wrote a lot of stuff. I mean, there was a lot of stuff. I can't read it all, or else we'd be here for a while. So I'm just going to read the middle part where I think he does. I think it sums up pretty well for me. It sums up for me the best part of this whole thing.
All right.
Listen. God, there's so much. It was hard to choose, but here's what he says. I'm just dropping in the middle. They really know their stuff. The knowledge and insight they are passing along is among the most valuable I have encountered. And then he goes on to say a bunch of more stuff and just ends it by saying the word recommended. And I got to tell you, it was an amazing, beautiful testament to what we're doing here on the show. And so I want to say, Alan Gladfelter, thank you so much. You made my day. This was amazing. I couldn't even read the whole thing to you, Dave.
That is a nice, unmitigated kind word. And so we thank you for that. And just a reminder to everyone else at home, if you have a kind word you want to share over at the podcast or about the podcast, you can go over to Apple Podcasts and leave a few kind words and a nice 5-star review. And like this one today, you will be shared with joy on the show and brighten up Brad's heart, Brad's delightful little unicorn, shamrock, yellow moon's purple star's heart. I love the idea, though, that in your notebook that you have up in the corner of every page is like, all right, time to draw one more unicorn. All right, now back to cartooning. All right, flip the page, one more unicorn.
I'm going to have to go through. I didn't realize I did that until I started talking about it. I've got a bunch of different symbols and stuff that appear throughout my sketchbook. I'm going to have to go through and do like a guide to my own hieroglyphics because there's a lot I got going on there.
Well, I think any peek into your brain would reveal that there's a lot going on there that scientists would be puzzled by. Yes, I think that's true. Well, Brad, that's a perfectly good spot to wrap it up. Thank you all for this week. Thank you, Gale, for coming on the show. Gosh, that was a delight to talk to Gale.
Yeah.
That was really nice. And so I'm going to say, or actually, Brad leads us off.
I'm going to say,
doing?
Get out of my way, Kellett. You've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my delightful friend, the unicorn, yellow moon, purple stars loving Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the cartoonist of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And my good close friend Dave Kellett, co-director of Stripped and cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
The Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net, and this episode was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may, like Alan, I put the Glad in Gladfelter. You could hear your review on a future episode.
That's right, and this week's episode, and many to come, have been sponsored by the good folks at Wacom over at wacom.com. We thank them and the new Wacom One for sponsoring the show. And Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/comiclab. So we will go ahead and say that twice, perhaps with some sexy emphasis, patreon.com/comiclab.
So, Dave, listen, I know you were kind of joking about my tomato fetish, but do you have any that are like a little extra, like lopsided and like
Lopsided?
Yeah, I don't like the symmetrical.
Played that joke, lopsided.
I don't like the symmetrical ones. I like the ones that are a little bit.
Why did that make it 1,000% more creepy with the detail of lopsidedness?
If it leads to well, I mean, there's actually a lot of us tomato fetishists out there. We've got
there's a whole subreddit.
And I mean, we communicate, our needs back and forth. Do you have any left?
Needs, okay. Brad, honest to God, look at my forehead over the camera. I'm sweating. This has made me so uncomfortable. It's like an instant flop sweat.
Do you have any left leaners? Stop it!
I'm out. I don't want to talk about this. I'm out. Oh God.